So I am very, very pleased to be the one introducing the speaker to you this morning. The Reverend Father Michael Rennier is the incoming Vice Rector of the Oratory of St. Gregory d'Augustine. He received his Master of Divinity from Yale, served as the pastor of the Anglican Church while living in Cape Cod, Massachusetts. He subsequently entered the Catholic Church and was ordained through the pastoral provision for formerly Anglican clergy that was created by Pope St. John Paul II. He is the web editor for Dappled Things magazine, a regular contributor at Alatea, where he often writes about homeschooling, and his book, The Forgotten Language, How Recovering the Poetics of the Mass Will Change Our Lives, is available from Sophia Institute. He is married with 6 children, all of whom are homeschooled. Welcome to Father Rennier.
Okay, so this talk, second talk, on why I homeschool so badly. So when people find out that I was homeschooled, has anyone else here actually been homeschooled, adults? Okay, so we got some second generation homeschooling, right? Good. So maybe you have a similar experience. When people find out that I was homeschooled, their eyes get real wide, and then they think about it for a second, and then they assure me, well, you're not that weird. It's debatable, though. I think they're being nice, because I am. It's odd. I think most people, when they find out, oh, you were homeschooled, they expect, oh, you're an antisocial monster. And they seem shocked that I'm capable of making eye contact, and I seem to be leading a fairly normal, well-adjusted life. Like they think I should be living in a log cabin somewhere, homesteading and hunting squirrels and writing a manifesto. So they think I'm normal, which is good. I fooled them. We can do it. The point is, right, I'm different. So are you. And so are your children. They don't fit in. The other children, if you look at all the other publicly educated children, they are all using TikTok, which I'm assured is a social media app. Not familiar. They're dating in middle school. Maybe they're 10, 11 years old, and they're dating. They're testing out sexual identities, 10 years old. They're obsessing over a designer handbag they saw on Instagram or that a friend at school had, and if you don't get it, then you're ostracized. They're wasting their youth, going overboard on sports. Meanwhile, all right, the homeschool children, they're all over here looking at, engineering blueprints for a combine tractor because they got interested in farming, and they're begging you to go move to a farm somewhere so they can live their dream, or they're sewing old-timey dresses because they wanted to transform into Laura Ingalls Wilder because they read the books. That one. Her name's Mary, but for a while we had to call her Laura. Right? They tried to make a campfire in our front yard. Or they're writing fantasy novels. Have any of your children written a novel yet? One, good. And you'll have more. I guarantee. A couple. You'll have more. A homeschooled child could probably tell me they've built a spaceship that went to the moon, or they've built a nuclear reactor and it's under their bed, and I would not blink an eye. I say, I'm sure you did. I make the comparison between these so-called normal children and homeschool children, and I am so grateful that our children do not fit in, that they are proudly themselves. They are expressive of their creativity, their interests. They are unconcerned with their future careers. They don't have anxiety over bullying. or social trends, that these kids are happy. And this gratitude is why I am adamant in pointing out that homeschooling is effective in so many different ways, even if we as parents consider that we homeschool badly. A few of you talked to me about it at the break. You said, well, I don't know what your house looks like, but mine is not going well, right? It's like that for all of us. In his novella, Scott King's Modern Europe, Evelyn Waugh, he narrates a conversation between a master of the classics named Scott King, who teaches at an English boys' prep school with his headmaster about a declining enrollment of students who are interested in taking the classics program. They don't want to study ancient literature. They don't want to study philosophy. And the headmaster says parents are not interested anymore. They want to qualify their boys for jobs in the modern world, and you can hardly blame them, can you? To that, Scott King, the teacher, he replies that yes, he can in fact blame them. And he says, I will stay here as long as any boy wants to read in the classics. I think it would be very wicked indeed to do anything to fit a boy for the modern world. And the headmaster replies, that's a short-sighted view. And of course, the point that Evelyn Waugh is making here is that studying impractical subjects for the sheer joy of it, the romance of it, this is the most long-sighted view that it is possible to take. Why? Because man does not live on bread alone. And the human being cannot be happy on practical knowledge alone. And here, of course, is where I hop on my soapbox again and declare that everything about this wild and beautiful creation into which God has placed his very heart, into which he personally joins us as the Christ child, assuming humanity and thus incarnating his love into the very fabric of who we are. Everything about it is a poem. And we are meant to live our lives as if every action is the creative action of a poet, to co-create along with our Maker, to reflect his beauty and to participate in it. And I suppose that makes me a foolish romantic. But of course, as Christians, we ought to be foolish romantics because we are living in a real-life love story. And so education is meant to be romantic, by which I mean, and I'll quote here St. Edith Stein, that the educator is called by God's mandate to open his pupil's soul to the workings of grace, and also to develop the dormant powers of the soul in accordance with God's image. And that statement, if you read it and you think about it, that is pure romance, this idea that education is founded on a metaphysical conception of the teaching profession. That teacher and student are not submitting to some arbitrary professional standards or the craven demands of practicality, but rather they are seeking knowledge as a treasure, as a great journey of discovery towards a source, that source of all knowledge that proceeds from a higher sphere, an authority far above us. And in such an atmosphere, you can almost begin to believe that elves and hobbits and King Arthur and the Holy Grail, they're real. But paling in comparison to those fictional ideals is the absolute truth that Christ and his mother and all the saints are the seat of wisdom, and our educational pilgrimage is a journey not towards the acquisition of external knowledge like a possession, but rather education is the condition of formation by which the human personality assumes its unique and saintly character, and that is real. And still following Edith Stein here, it's a way of saying that education happens first in the soul. And the greatest power that can act upon the soul is God's grace. And grace, by definition, is a superabundance that spills over into eternity. And it escapes our sensibilities. It makes us unfit for the modern world because it's making us fit for the next life. So do you see how we've just turned the entire modern conception of education upside down? True education addresses the good of the human soul. It is not, as a rule, concerned with practicality as its purpose. Those practical accomplishments will naturally flow from such an education, but it's not the goal. True education is not the imposition of exterior knowledge, but rather it is the formative. It is a formative process by which the entire human being is remade from the inside out by God's grace. And it shapes a wonderful, thoughtful, mature person prepared to seek happiness. And such happiness, we as Catholics believe, is bound up in our progress towards holiness. And to be holy, to be a saint, that's what the word literally means, holy, to be set apart. It is very much not a fit for the modern world. Anything worth doing is worth doing badly, Chesterton famously declared. And friends, if you are homeschooling, and I think you're all homeschooling, you're all amateurs, maybe there's a couple professional degreed people here, but I think most of us are amateurs when it comes to teaching. And if you are insisting on making your children unfit for the modern world by making them study religion and philosophy and the Iliad and the Lord of the Rings, and if you take them to Mass as part of their school day, and if you never go to training sessions to update yourself on modern professional teaching techniques, then you're doing it badly. And that's good. And it's true, you're probably not a trained expert in education. You might be teaching on subjects that you yourself do not fully understand. There may be lacuna in your curriculum. A professional teacher might scoff at your qualifications, but somehow this education that you were providing is superior to every other education. Neither my wife nor I have the qualification to be a teacher. I know very little about pedagogical techniques or managing a classroom or what requirements exist for standardized testing. When it comes to specific subjects, sure, I know a fair amount about philosophy or theology or literature, but I am terrible at math and science, engineering. When I talk to friends who are professional teachers, I am very much impressed by their dedication, by their talent. So this is not saying teachers are doing anything wrong or bad. And also, if you look at these public schools, they have tons of resources. Every subject is covered adequately. And here we are as these homeschool parents with our little one-room schoolhouse. And it's hard not to become anxious in the comparison. Can a teacher who is not trained as a teacher do a good job at teaching a child? And many homeschool parents report feeling inadequate. They ask that question and they are worried the answer is no. In the past, I've asked around, probably amongst this community, for various articles I've written on the topic, and parents, when I ask, they all have that response, every single one. All right, so one mom told me, I feel like we're behind. We're always behind. And so I feel overwhelmed by it. Another one uses the exact same word, overwhelmed about almost everything and questioning whether I'm giving my kids what they need when they need it. A third mom I talked to As far as feeling overwhelmed, that never stops. So same word, overwhelmed. And I think it's important for us to identify that source of the feeling. Why is it that we feel overwhelmed? And it's right there in that question I already asked about whether we can do a good job as a professional teacher. The source of our stress is in that comparison. Because these teachers are professionals. They have experience. They have lesson plans. They have resources. They have well-structured calendars. Even other homeschoolers may seem to be academically way ahead of where your children are, or they seem more organized. And so it's hard not to make comparisons even with other homeschool families. And so if you look around and you feel like perhaps you're not doing such a good job, you are not alone. But here's the thing, all of these parents who feel inadequate also have these tremendous stories of success. I mean, you can just see it. They say, well, we're overwhelmed, we're doing it all wrong. But you say, well, I talked to your child, and your child's amazing. So perhaps we're all doing better than we think we are, right? So maybe it's time to stop worrying so much about whether we're doing good or bad at this. I want to offer a few encouragements. So first, your children are probably doing perfectly fine academically. The National Home Education Research Institute points out homeschool students score above average on achievement tests regardless of their parents' level of education or their family's income. In other words, it doesn't matter how well trained you are or how many resources you can provide. Chances are that your child is already above average and will remain above average academically. Sometimes homeschoolers don't notice that because they're not basing their education on test taking. And one mom told me about the experience of this. She said, I took my oldest to take a standardized test before she was going to high school. She was nervous because she needed to do well. She wanted to get into the proper grade. She was worried it would be embarrassing if she didn't get into her age grade. And the results came back and the subjects all said it was just an acronym, PHS. So this mom went and she looked up, well, what does PHS mean? And it turns out it means post-high school. So the child was already educated beyond the high school level. And to offer a slightly different counterexample, I know another mom who gave her child a standardized test just to make sure, okay, well, I want to make sure my daughter is actually learning something here. I think she was in 8th grade, so she took the PSAT. I think that's the age. And it was all great, except for one subject. Terrible at, I don't remember what the subject was. We'll say history. Terrible at history. Failing grade at history. Well, you just take that and you say, okay, well, we're going to learn history. Right? That's what this mom did. They learned history. The daughter caught right up. Fine. No problem. So it's easy to catch up. It's easy to fix these things if you occasionally just do a check-in. So second, I think one of the really valuable aspects of homeschooling is that it allows us that flexibility. Each child is different. So it should not be surprising that the curriculum, the progress of our children is different. I'd say your child might be way ahead in math and way behind in language. You could try to fix it, you might not care. But that doesn't mean your child you're failing because your neighbor's child is good at language. Right? Because your neighbor's child might not be good at math. Because of that, that's why I say the comparisons are so unhelpful. Our curriculum is not as structured and organized as this family. I saw their lesson plans, and it's amazing, and we don't do any of that. It just doesn't matter. I mean, I watch Matlock every morning from 9 to 10. And I played with Legos. And here I am, and you're listening to me. And I don't know why. So third encouragement, parents are the best teachers by definition. And that's nothing against professional educators. Like I said, they are amazing. But no matter how much training they have, they will never connect with your child the way that you will. Parents are the primary educators of their children. So I'm actually teaching a class this upcoming year for the Chesterton Academy that's in formation in St. Louis. And their philosophy is very specific. And they actually asked me that question when they were interviewing me about, well, what's the role of parents? And I said, they're in charge. Right? And the headmaster for Chesterton said, great, that's what we believe too. Right? So even when you're coming together in these slightly more organized or formal educational ways, the parents are still in charge. So make no mistake about that, because you are the most qualified. The education that you can provide goes well beyond academics. And so education, the education of a homeschool, it addresses academics, but also character and spirituality, independence, family. Education is the kindling of a flame, says Socrates. It's not the filling of a vessel. The best educators are the ones who light that fire, who the children trust and love, who help the children discover wisdom by developing a sense of wonder, because wonder is the beginning of wisdom. That's also Socrates. That's the kind of education that promotes not only knowledge and job skills, but also happiness. It's the kind of education that only a parent is qualified to provide. And Aristotle's clear that the relationship between a teacher and a student is a type of love. And no one loves a child more than mom and dad. And that brings us back to that title of this talk, Why I Homeschool Badly, and the Chesterton quote that if it's worth doing badly. And I equivocate here on what it means to use those words bad and good in education. But even more to the point, Chesterton, he's not making an excuse there. He's not saying, go ahead and do a lazy effort, a bad effort, incompetence is acceptable. That's not what he's saying. But what he is saying is that if the professionals claim that you are doing it badly because you're an amateur, the response should be that this is precisely because the education is so important that we have to defend and promote the role of the amateur. The root of that word amateur is from amor, one who loves. The world needs people who act out of love, who have deep and abiding passions, that they are doing these things, they're putting their energy into it not because they simply want to earn money, but because they believe that these things are worth doing. And this concept of love is fundamentally at odds with the professionalization of education. And so you can see why the claim is made that homeschooling is bad and that you are incapable of teaching your children, or the children are poorly socialized, or that you're setting them up to fail. But don't fall for that negativity, friends, because the amateur teacher, the mother or the father who teaches their children because they love them, this is the force that shapes children into the amazing adults that it has been my pleasure to grow up with throughout my homeschooling experience, and who I have the privilege of watching to grow up right now alongside my own children. And every day they are a surprise. Their potential is limitless because God has poured His love into them, and we, their teachers, pour our love into them. And this is the force that unlocks that door for them into success, not only in this life, but far more importantly, in the next life. That they are loved because these children deserve our love. And I thank you for your self-sacrifice to become amateur teachers and to love them the best that you can. You've made the harder choice. And you've done it because these children are precious. Remember St. Bonaventure, if you learn nothing except Christ, you learn everything. Because you are learning love, not as theoretical knowledge, but as interior transformation. And in that communication is Christ himself. A friend of mine, Daniel McInerney, who teaches at Christendom College, he wrote an open letter to all of his graduating students recently. And in it, he tells them one way of describing the education you have just completed here at Christendom College is to describe it as an effort to make you unfit for the modern world. The world insofar as it is no friend of Christ. The world insofar as it has rejected the notion of any reality that transcends physical nature. The world insofar as it strives to master and control nature via technological prowess. The world insofar as it is devoted to power and prestige and money and sensuality. And consequently, the world as it is filled with anxiety, banality, ugliness, and sin. That is a short-sighted view of education and of life, to seek to make a person fit for this base and ephemeral world. So my encouragement to you is to ignore the noise, the chattering class, and the professionals who say that your efforts are not good enough. Home education, in my view, is just barely good enough. By which I mean it's the beginning of a long journey in which we learn to love our children. It's the gift of our very best. And that's just good enough. But if we can hand them to Christ and cooperate with His grace, well, that's something else entirely. Because then we are accomplishing the very goal of education, which according to Edith Stein is to bring forth offspring who are to see the day of salvation, who will dwell in God's love forever. So God takes our just good enough and He makes it perfect. And that is the long view, which accurately identifies that which is valuable. Value in education is not to have more iPads in the classroom, or a lot of children in a small space, or a professional teacher, or career-oriented practical training. Identifying value means to first take in the whole of the picture, that which is eternal, that which promotes happiness and human flourishing. And this is the view that sees education as the introduction to a great romance between Christ and His bride. And every moment that we get to be alive is charged with the tension and grandeur of that relationship, which is grounded in transcendent reality. And in this way, we and our children learn to love even this world that we are not fit for, and to love it passionately, to love it enough to want to understand it, to contribute to its good, to cooperate with grace in redeeming it, and to make it beautiful even as we turn together to our Lord, who is the source of all that is good. And that's the end. Questions? Concerns? Good. Mm-hmm. So how do we balance our schedules and so on? Yeah. So my wife works, but not very much. She's a wedding photographer. So if you have a Catholic wedding you need photographed, call my wife, Corey Nations. And she works with Corey Nations. But it's not that much. She's full-time. If we're talking about, well, I'm a housewife, I have a job, whatever. I don't know what the language is. Her job is homeschooling our kids. And that's what we're committed to having her do before everything else. And then how do we balance the rest of our schedule? I think that we need to be thoughtful as parents about what our kids are doing and why we're having them do it. Because there's lots of good things out there that you can do, but you can't do it all. So it's important to balance what we're committing them to with an actual healthy home life and the ability to simply be children. Because what I see, I think I made a comment earlier about, well, we're giving their childhood away through sports. That's where you really see it. So these kids, don't have free time on Saturday. I live in kind of a hippie-ish South City neighborhood, and the parents there don't care about sports. But we put them on a soccer team, and we're really bad. Our teams are always really bad because our neighborhood doesn't care. And we go out and we have to play these West County teams, right? And these West County teams just stomp us, right? Because these kids are in full-time sports all the time. They're soccer professionals. But you can see it in the game, and it almost makes me sad. At the end of the game, you will sometimes hear a parent, so our parents on our team will all say, oh, it was great, you kicked the ball really hard, and do you want to go get coffee at the coffee shop or get ice cream? And the kids are like, yeah, we're going home now. And you'll see these other teams where it's coming from a different like sports-oriented culture, and the parents say, all right, we got to drive through the McDonald's and grab quick lunch because you have 2 more games over here, and we got to drive. And I just think it's got to be miserable if you're the kid. But I guess people think they have to do it, but I guess I'm here to tell you, you don't have to do that, right? You can let your kids just have unstructured time and be bored or make up their own games. So that's good for them. It's also good for your family to not overcommit in that way and to be willing to say, well, this is not for us, which isn't to say it's a bad thing or other families shouldn't be engaging in it because that's for them. But drawing, I think, healthy boundaries is really important before you just get sucked up to this vortex of activity. So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Just curious, from a practical standpoint, not after you...
Do we use a curriculum? I think you've mistaken me for someone that's good at homeschooling and knows what I'm doing.
People just get one.
I don't.
Which works better or not?
With some of our kids, one works better and another one works better, and we've tried a lot of different things, and I don't know how they learn. It's a mystery. Yeah, it's very confusing. So we've gone through probably 20 different church Latin textbooks. How many have we gone through? We're terrible at Latin, which is hilarious because I say Mass in Latin. So she's 14. She's had 4 different Latin curricula, all of which have failed, right? Do you know Latin? No? Okay. Any more questions about how I can help you with your homeschooling?
I have a question about sports.
Sports, yeah.
It's exactly what my husband and I's philosophy. And
Yeah.
we have a son that wants that life. He wants to do travel. He would just chop at the bit. I want to sign up for this. I want to sign up for that. I want to play this. I want to play that. He wants our life to be sports in the car.
He wants your life miserable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, what do you do with a child like that? He's our most difficult one to homeschool, and he's just obsessed with sports. I don't know where he got it.
How old is he?
He's 12.
Okay, so he's 12. I can just tell you how we've handled some of it, which I don't know if it's the right thing or the wrong thing. So each child plays a sport. When they're younger, they can pick the sport. We don't really care. It's just CYC, low stakes. The fewer practices, the better. We're not driving. We're not traveling anywhere. You could just do one.
Yeah.
And that's, when your family's bigger too, so we have 6. I know other people have more than that even. You just can't, even just one sport. If, say, 3 of them pick soccer, you're in a world of trouble already, because that's 3 practices, 3 games every week during the season. And we make them stay in season, so you're not playing soccer all year. You can play it for the season, and then we'll see. But you can always go out and play soccer in the park if you're that into it. And you know what? They don't. It's like, well, I don't think you care that much, otherwise you'd be out practicing. Now, occasionally something does like spark. So our oldest daughter, she did get really into volleyball. She's good at it. She's tall like her mother. She has some talent. But she's 16, and we really wouldn't let her engage fully in that travel culture until she was a little older, and we saw, okay, you do probably have some of the physical tools to actually be good at this. And you're a little older, you can make that choice, you can drive yourself to some practices. But even then, we wouldn't let her be on the travel team that goes to Florida and here and there. So she does some travel. There's a season where she does do some things more widely. But I think at the age of 11, 12, 13, you're wasting. That's my opinion. You're wasting your time and your money. These people think, oh, my kid's going to be amazing because they're so good at the age of 12. Well, maybe that's all the growing they did. Like, you really need to wait when it comes to sports to see, like, do they have a future in this? And otherwise, just do it for fun, right? I don't know. That's my philosophy. Other people might differ, and that's okay. So here, and we'll go to you. Okay. Yeah. So how do you work with can you homeschool a child with special needs? I think the answer is yes or no. It's very contextual. How many kids do you have? Are you able to pay attention to all of your children in your particular context? Are you able to just focus on one or two children? Some of it you can diagnose, and I think as a parent, you can work with your kid in terms of therapy just as well as anyone else can. Other times, yeah, you might need a professional tutor, or you could do like a hybrid type idea where you're working with them as much as possible, and then you have a specialized tutor come in, or you take them to a tutor as needed. Or maybe you just need to go to a school. All right? Occasionally that is the answer. Like, even if it's just, okay, for this period of life, I don't have the tools, I can't figure out how to teach my child to read because of whatever their needs are, I'm going to take them to a school for a couple of years, and then we'll evaluate then. So I think you can be very flexible with homeschooling. Like we want to homeschool early, and then we want to put them in high school for certain reasons, or vice versa, or we just want to homeschool all the way through, or whatever. I would just say any solution is a good one, as long as you've come to that solution as parents. Okay.
It seems like traditional schooling is there to, get good grades and then get into a good college and then get a career, right? So what's your opinion about college? Are any of your kids geared towards college and want to go? And how are you doing that?
I'm actually super ambivalent about college. I don't really know. I mean, I think my theory as a father who would be spending the money is I'll spend it if you're going there for a specific purpose that you need it for. Right? I want to be an engineer. I am going to go study engineering, and then I will graduate with this degree, and that's what I want to do. That's what makes me happy. I'm for that. I'm not for every child needs to just go to college because that's what you do. I don't get the point of that whole culture. If none of my kids go to college, I'll be fine. If all 6 go, that's fine too. One beautiful thing about homeschooling is if they are academically a little bit ahead, you can just put them in very cheap community college classes and let them kind of explore it from that angle for a year or two before they turn 18 and they're really ready to set out. And they'll be ahead, and then they'll have some sort of idea of, well, this is what is required to go to college. What I realize is wherever you graduate from, that's what the degree says. So community college for a couple of years is kind of a genius idea, because the degree will still say, it's not going to say community college, right? Yeah. So I don't know if that's helpful or not, but yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so how do you keep education something that they look forward to, and there's some romance to it as opposed to we just got to get through this checklist, right? And as you mentioned, I don't know what I'm talking about because my wife does it all. So, Mary, how do you stay excited about learning? So part of it she's saying is she had some things she didn't like at all, and she thought there were subjects she didn't like, so then we experimented with curriculum and learning styles, and that helped?
Yeah, a lot.
Yeah.
And then add different styles.
Right. So we identified with her specifically, she has some talent at fine arts. We happen to know a really amazing fine artist who has a studio around the corner from our house. This fine artist is super generous with her time, and Mary goes and works as a studio assistant for her, which is an opportunity she wouldn't be able to have if she wasn't homeschooled. But she's learning all sorts of practical skills. It's almost like an apprenticeship. So I think you can indulge a little bit if your if your kids show a specific interest in this. There is this caricature of homeschooling where the child shows an interest in, a light bulb, and so then you all go and you research the history of light, like Thomas Edison and electricity, and then you build like a little AC dynamo, and then you spend 3 months on this, and all they've learned is like how to power a light bulb, which might be okay. That's the caricature though, but I do think that there's certainly room for a lot of flexibility in, okay, so you're not clicking with math as much right now. We're not giving up on math, that would be irresponsible, but we can focus a little bit more on art for a little bit, and then we'll kind of experiment with different math curricula or learning styles and see if we can kind of get you back into it at some point in a more serious way. So I think that's kind of what's worked
You're speaking
for
to an
us.
absolute.
All right, I think we're,
Yep,
yeah,
thank
okay.
you.
Thank you, everyone.